Do you think that all the information available in these various resources in different countries, in different languages of different periods of history, they give a same image of the history of Mongolia, or there are some contradictions happening as well?
On some of the most important issues, they give the same image. For example, almost everyone who came was amazed at the Mongolian women, usually in a negative way. They said, oh, the Mongolian women, they come right into the gear and they give their opinion just like they were a man. They sit down and eat with people, and they even drink with the men if they want to. And they sometimes push the ambassadors aside when they, so over and over, you have this image. Well, the people who came here didn't like it. And sometimes they differed in their details about this queen or that queen, or they used an odd name or an odd title. But over and over, you have the same sense of the power of Mongolian women. So sometimes the details are wrong, but you can still feel the spirit of the times. Because all you have to do is walk into Mongolian gear today, and you will see women are strong in Mongolia.
Yes, there are, and I guess this is one of the messages you would like to give through your secret story of the Mongolian queens. And in the back of the book, I read that you say that Genghis Khan established the great empire, but women have shaped it. How do you also link it with the historical role of Mongolian women?
If you look at the time of Genghis Khan, everyone's aware of his 4 sons and what they did. But his 4 sons, like most of the men and all of the generals, were mostly on the front in battle campaigns. They were mostly far away from Mongolia. And for the most part, Mongolia was being administered by women during this time. Particularly, Genghis Khan's daughters acquired a sequence of kingdoms along the Silk Route. The first daughter, and the most important in some way, was Alakai Bek, who ruled over the Ongut people, what is today northern China. And she was left to figure out how to administer, how to control a sedentary people, how to administer commerce, how do you set up trade. Genghis Khan was on the battlefield. He wasn't setting up trade conferences, for example. And so the women were left in charge of great parts of the empire. And this is a part of the history that's overlooked by looking only at the warfare. People forget, yes, Genghis Khan conquered a great empire, but you can also say Alexander the Great conquered a great empire. But one of the main differences is Genghis Khan's empire endured. It lasted for 150 years because he had people who were able to administer it properly. Alexander the Great's empire died the day he died, because he had not created a system to administer it. But Genghis Khan, through his daughters, created the empire. With his army, he conquered other armies, but with his daughters, he created an empire.
And when you say the system of governing the state, if you could share with the principles or examples which were used at that time but could be applicable at the present moment.
I think with Genghis Khan, we can look at all of his laws. He had many laws on many subjects. But if you boil it down to just a few principles, I would say, what are the 3 most important principles of Genghis Khan's government? And that is, first, equality of people under the law. The law applies to everyone, even to his own sons, to the husbands of his wives, to the husbands of his daughters, to everyone in his family as well as everyone in the country. That's an important but simple principle.
Right.
Everybody is subject to the same law. I think the second principle that's important for Genghis Khan is people rise up according to their ability. Doesn't matter who their parents were. Doesn't matter whether the father was a great Khan, the mother was a great queen, or whether they were just herders on the steppe. All of the generals around him, all of the major men who accompanied him, came from very low beginnings in Mongolian society. But because of their ability, he was able to recognize that and use them. Then the third principle I think that's important for Genghis Khan is, even though he was the richest man in the world, if we look at all the goods that came in, he conquered China, he conquered the Middle East, all the silks and gold and jewels, and and all goods of the world poured into Mongolia. And yet you look at him, he began his life in a felt ger. He ended his life in a felt ger. Genghis Khan did not get rich. He gave the wealth to the people. So always the goods were flowing in at the top, but they flowed out to the people. From the people, talent flowed upward. These are very important principles, I think, for any country, not just for Mongolia, but for any country today. If everyone is equal in the law, you recognize people by their talent and their deeds, and you share goods equally and fairly, that will make a strong and powerful country.
Very true. Also, you are talking about the way how Genghis Khan treated queens in his period of ruling, and where you also connected to the issue of the gender balancing or gender policy. If you could share with that perspective.
I think if we look back at the childhood of Genghis Khan, and we remember that, first of all, his mother had been kidnapped, and then she had been abandoned when he was only about 8 years old after his father died. So he grew up basically with a woman as the head of the family because his father had died. And in the words of The Secret History, you know, Mother Erlum pulled her hat down on her head, she tied up the end of her skirt, and she took a stick and she ran up and down the Onan River night and day, digging up roots to fill the stomachs of her children. So she was left as a widow, and her family deserted her, or more accurately, really, her husband's family deserted her. And yet she survived, and every child lived. This was a great accomplishment. This is the world Genghis Khan grew up in, seeing his mother work every day to save these children. He had a very harsh childhood in many ways.
Correct.
But then he found the greatest happiness a person can find through love. Love for Bersta, this young girl with fire in her eyes. He loved her very much, but he lost her very quickly because she too was kidnapped. At this point in life, he could have given up. He could have maybe gone away to live in another place or looked for another wife or something. But it was at this point in life that Genghis Khan's true character came out. No, he would either rescue Bersta or he would die. That was the choice he faced. He was not going to live without this woman that he loved. So he risked everything that he had to get her back. And when he had Bersta back again, he had a different awareness of the importance of women. And for the rest of his life, he relied heavily upon his wife, Bersta in particular, but then later his other 3 wives, upon the advice of his mother. He didn't always agree or disagree with them, but he relied upon them and respected them. Then when his children grew up, he saw the qualities of his daughters. I think one of the most important episodes was when a young girl, we don't know what her relationship to him exactly was, but she was named Altani. And she ran out, and a Tatar man was trying to kill Genghis Khan's youngest son, the little boy Tolo. And she ran out, even though she was only a girl, and she jumped on him, and she saved the life of Tolo. Genghis Khan saw these things every day, and he learned from them, and he recognized the bravery of women, the strength of women, and the importance of women. And he wanted to use that to make a stronger Mongolia.